This JRPG game's actually pretty good.
Yes, this is the best medium rare meat that I've ever seen. Too bad it's a goddamn chicken breast!
Hey, what's that sound?
Coming straight to your house! Foxworthy, where have you been? Your fans have been waiting for the next deltarune video for months!
I know, I've been trying to get to work on it, but, everything's just been so busy with college starting back up, and then it was Christmas, and now I'm working on my own video game.
You're making a video game?
Yeah, it's actually something I've been working on for a little over a year now, though I still don't have that much I can show you all about it.
I take it that means this video is not a devlog for your game then.
No, but that'll be coming at a later date for sure.
So, if you aren't here to talk about the game you're working on, then what is this video about, Foxworthy?
Well, I kinda promised the viewers another deltarune video, 8 months ago and kept getting sidetracked while working on it, so I wanted to put something out.
8 months? You mean to tell me that you never even put out that complete thematic analysis of deltarune video?
Yeah, but honestly, I think the scope of that video was getting a little too large for me to realistically make with my inability to focus, so I decided to break that topic up into a few smaller videos that'd be easier to make. This video is the first of the smaller parts, and with a looming approach of Chapter 5 in the next few months, I thought this topic would be one of the best I could make.
Well, at least you're finally putting something out again.
Hey, it's future Foxworthy here, or, well, I guess it's still past Foxworthy, but, less in the past than the Foxworthy you've been watching up until this point. So yeah, I kind of took too long to make this video, obviously, and, well, a lot has happened since then. We obviously got, the Chapter 5 announcement trailer, and then, there's been other theories that are kind of covering very similar subjects to what I intended to talk about today. So we have, Spooky Dude just recently did a theory, I'm pretty sure, on, what Friend's role in the story is going to be, which very much contradicts kind of my own thoughts on it. And then, of course, you have things like, Andrew Cunningham's recent analysis of, a lot of motifs in the story. And one thing, I really appreciate about that is, it doesn't really contradict anything I'm going to kind of mention throughout this video. I think there's one point where he gets into stuff about, demon and heaven and hell, a correlation to light and dark being, a really messy connection. But ultimately, that doesn't actually change anything I'm going to say about either of those subjects. Anyway, let's continue with the video now.
Let's get this video started already! Mike, turn on the green screen!
Guys! Oh, sorry, didn't mean to scare you. Come in! I've been talking with the mics recently, and I think we've made a crazy breakthrough! You are not gonna believe it! Why do I look so deranged? I don't know what you're talking about! This hat is just to keep out
the voices.
Anyway, don't worry about that, I'm doing fine!
Hey boss, you're finally back, and you brought a friend! Are they an IC RAM believer?
Don't worry about him, the mics say some of the craziest stuff, am I right? Not like me, I've only got completely sane theories that everyone will accept.
Oh yeah, you mean my theory about how Chris is actually Kevin McAllister from Home Alone 2?
Both of you be quiet, you're undermining my sanity here! Hey, where are you going? You haven't even heard my theory yet! Trust me, this'll be good! Please come take a look at the evidence, I put tons of work into gathering it! You'll stay? Great! Okay, so come on, right over here to the corkboard! I'm sure by now you've heard of image_friend, correct? Of course you have! It's the strange Undertale amalgamate-like nightmare cat thing that's been haunting the game of Deltarune for years! And this board here, it has notes detailing every known sighting and relationship between Friend and other important areas of the game. Might look like a mess, but trust me, in the end, this will all weave together into a really satisfying explanation. You see all these sticky notes on the board? Yeah, they represent a large portion of Deltarune's core motifs that represent large areas of the story. And in order to figure out which character in Deltarune's story fits the identity of this smiley, creepy crawly the best, I have to use the power of literary analysis to figure out which character aligns with these motifs the best. So, now that you understand the premise of what this board is all about, we need to address the two most clearly associated motifs with friend: cats and smiles. These should be pretty self-explanatory, given that friend is literally defined by the two traits of a cat-like form and a giant crooked smile. Heck, even some of the earliest theories from before the cat traits were revealed were that friend was inspired by the Cheshire Cat. But, you know, friend being a cat doesn't necessarily make that a motif, right? For that, we need to analyze other parts of Deltarune's story that tie to that topic. For cats, one of the only places we really have to look is the Spampton Sweepstakes pages, where Noelle wrote blog posts about her experiences with playing an in-universe game called Cat Petters 2.
Okay. I got no one. And believe me when I say this, but Tenna is in cahoots with Maya Humdinger. That's right, the Maya Humdinger from Paw Patrol, who I also may be forced to roleplay his cats. He's training us to be the replacement for Humdinger's cats. So when they die, we will replace them, and then he will try to use our mic powers, even though we all mic, to defeat the Paw Patrol. It makes sense. However, the Paw Patrol has already planned for this.
Yeah, you might as well just carry on with the video, boss. You'll be at this for a while.
Right. Well, in the game, Noelle recounts some of her notable experiences, including her encounter with a strange egg that resembles the functionality of the eggs we collect in Deltarune, as well as the supposed creation of the Pipis from the code that she got in a spam email. But there's a different detail that we care about here. Noelle describes the game in a very particular way. All of the cats are made up of collections of colored blobs and shapes, which actually makes it a reference to a real video game called Cats, with a Z. But the real reference isn't necessarily important. Let's go back to that thing about the cats being made of colored blobs. People who haven't played Chapter 4 might already know where I'm going with this. It's none other than the prophecy panel about Hell's Tail taking Crawl. I mean, just look at it, it's literally made of blobs. But this single connection alone opens up a lot of other relationships that fill this picture in more and more. See, this tale is referenced in one other area of Chapter 4, notably the hidden room behind the window panel used to access Chapter 4's Egg Room. There, an organic speaks in jumbled up text saying, "Lost where the trees would grow, the children followed the pointed tail. The poor children." Now, you might have noticed that the tail I showed earlier notably wasn't pointed, right? Well, hidden in the game's files is another version of that same image, but it does have a point at the end. A pointed tail described as belonging to hell? That's devil imagery, baby! And trust me, this game has no shortage of demon imagery, which makes this yet another motif that we can connect to the board.
Me a letter saying that he was the real Mike, and that sent me on a wild goose chase, let me tell you. Because believe this, his regal name isn't Mike. So, when I was looking at his legally stolen birth records, it didn't say Mike, which led me to figuring out after spending a month of my life on this research that he was just fucking with me. Oh, that Ryder. He'll get it when I finally figure out who Mike is. Then I'll go to that damned lighthouse of oppression and show him all of my papers. Damn you, Ryder! Damn you, Paw Patrol!
Wait, is this the reason you keep making me play the intro to Paw Patrol on loop? I get like 100 channels now. You could literally watch actual mystery dramas.
But this allows me to get inside Ryder's head. And if I can think like Ryder, why, then I'll be able to know when he's going to strike!
You haven't even been watching the actual show! Just the intro cinematic that plays before the show! Wait, you know Paw Patrol isn't real, right?
That's just what Mayor Humdinger wants you to believe!
Right, so anyway, from there we can bring up biblical ideas like Lucifer, which Chris seemingly references through the title of Lightbringer that King uses for them, as well as the constant appearances of apple imagery. In addition, there's the Devil's association with the number 666, but we'll talk about that later. For now, the most meaningful connection we can make here is Jevil, the secret boss of Chapter 1, who is quite literally a jester devil. Jevil is an interesting character because of his backstory involving a strange figure who approached him one day and shared knowledge that seemingly drove him mad, forcing his closest friend Sham to lock him up. But, as Sham said, supposedly that actually meant locking everyone else up, and he was the only truly free one. This idea of freedom is a motif very important to Deltarune's story, so much so that it even has a leitmotif that the community has named after it. But this is where everything gets really interesting, because from the topic of freedom, we can talk about the other secret bosses, two of which have very notable relationships with the character Friend. Chapter 2 is where we are first acquainted with this strange figure that we now know as Friend, hidden in the darkness of Queen's basement on the side quest to fight Spamton. In addition, Spamton's shop includes dialogue asking about friends, which is the first time we hear the name Mike brought up in the game.
Hey, boss, you called?
What? No.
No, I think he was actually talking about me, you guys.
Guys, listen. No! None of you are the Mike I'm talking about.
Oh, you mean the original Mike?
I'm the original. Mike!
What kind of fool do you take me for? He's
Mike.
He's
Mike.
yours.
Mike.
I'm.
Mike.
Are there any other
Mikes.
I should know about? I'm out of here.
Okay, so yeah, I'm relatively certain that the actual character Spamton was referring to is our very own image_friend, but let's put a pin in that for now. Also, on the note of Spamton, he literally has the pink and gold eye imagery because of his glasses. But we can't talk about Spamton in Chapter 2 without getting into the topic of the Weird Route, the hidden path through Cyber City in which you use Noelle's Ice Shock attack to freeze all the enemies, preventing them from running away before being defeated.
You know, now that I think about it, I think the reason that that boss lady, what's her name, the deer lady, you know, with the blonde hair and the blue arms, Carol, you know, I think the reason she's rich is because she owns Icy's Pizza, and you know, Icy's Pizza. You know, who else is naming it Icy's Pizza? I don't know who else is naming it Icy's Pizza. I'm probably naming it. I also think I think she's probably a Power Ranger. You know, she's got the the Power Rangers in her house. You know, I think Carol's also a black belt in judo. She's probably really strong.
This all culminates in the acquirement of the Thorn Ring from Spamton, and the use of the Snowgrave spell on Berdley before we head to Queen's Mansion where we face off against Spamton Neal alone. See, in addition to Spamton's ties to freedom in the main route where he speaks of breaking his strings and reaching heaven, the Weird Route battle against Spamton references freedom in a different way, suggesting that the path we're on might just be the key to it, whether that's for better or for worse. Spamton and the Weird Route even continue to be relevant outside of the game, however, as on the Deltarune website, between the releases of Chapters 2 and 3 and 4 occurred the Spamton Sweepstakes, the home to Noelle's blog post that I referenced earlier. On another set of pages released to hype up the community for the impending launch of Chapters 3 and 4, Toby added some pages that we know in hindsight are a direct reference to the Weird Route. On a page with the URL path Chapter 5, we can see a list of numbers correlating to each of the game's 5 chapters, with the numbers 1 and 3 hidden, and all of the other numbers are different sizes. When traveling to some of these pages, namely the first 3, we can find text that denotes them as either applicable or not applicable. The Chapter 5 page instead reveals a single red dot, which can be clicked to lead us down a rabbit hole of a couple other pages. The imagery of the red dot paired with the thank you text paint a clear connection to the chapter's Weird Route, but one of the pages reveals a more interesting connection. Notably, the page that asks how long did it take her to smile, with 2 input fields for an email and an answer. The nature of this question, of course, ties us right back into one of the other 2 motifs we established right from the very start of this, the smile motif. And for those of the community who did answer the question, they got email responses back from a character with a very particular form of speaking. A character who's been present with us since even before the very start of Deltarune. A character who took over Toby Fox's Twitter account and spoke to his fans about his search for us. Hey, Future Foxworthy again. I just wanted to mention, while I make the claim that the speaker in the smile email responses is the same person as Gaster, there is actually evidence of the contrary. Namely that the text in those emails isn't in full caps like how Gaster usually speaks. I make this claim with the intention of implying that Gaster in some way wants the player to do the weird route, but while it's entirely possible that the speaking may be from two entirely different characters, there are actually other points supporting that Gaster is affiliated with these weird route pages. 1. All caps text is used on the pages for chapters 1, 2, and 3, so the same character being associated with chapter 4 page as well would also make sense. 2. The how long did it take her to smile questions almost seem like they are, in a way, a survey, just like how the original survey program that Gaster dropped containing chapter 1 was a survey. And 3, of course, those 2 points are actually further supported by the new ARG updates that occurred since I originally recorded this script, given that the current page title on the thank you page is Interim Result in all caps, and the page now outright confirms that each stage of questioning has in fact been narrowing down candidate players, almost as if it's a survey to find the right ones.
As supposedly he needs our help to create a new future, leading to the surprise drop of Chapter 1 on Halloween. This idea of creating a new future with our help is a topic riddled throughout Deltarune's story, since, as I've brought up on a previous video, even the name of the game itself can literally be translated to mean change the unchangeable, or change the prophecy. The prophecy is something that's been haunting both the players and characters in the story since the very start of the game. Right from the beginning, Toby has made the implication that Deltarune will only have one unchangeable ending. Chapter 4 dials this looming presence of fate to 11, however, with the final prophecy supposedly being so upsetting that Ralsei felt he had to keep it a secret from Susie, and when Susie did find out, she smashed the panel out of rage. But while these characters deal with the helplessness of being bound by fate, Old Man Gerson shows up to mentor Susie to guide her to always follow her own path, and he even ends up being this chapter's secret boss. At the end of his battle, Gerson implies that he found a shadow crystal in his desk, seemingly placed there by somebody who wanted him to use it, but he wasn't interested in it. This helps to reinforce the community belief that certain characters have been given their shadow crystals deliberately. But with the topics of the shadow crystals, the weird route, and freedom established, we can easily move on to discuss Chapter 3's secret boss, or rather the first half of the secret boss questline. And now for a quick word from our sponsors! Anybody who's played the chapter by now should know that the Roaring Knight is the actual character we get the Shadow Crystal from. But what interests me more is the quest to obtain the Shadow Mantle needed to defeat the Knight. The community always jokes about how Ram should have been the secret boss of the chapter, being a character who explicitly references lines of dialogue characteristic of characters like Jevil and Spamton. However, I feel like the entire inclusion of Ram in this chapter is honestly just a joke that kind of flew over the heads of everyone in the community. Doesn't it seem even a little intentional to you that this character said all the funny magic words to get into the club's secret boss and yet still isn't the secret boss? Yeah, methinks Toby was just messing with us. Anyway, that aside, Ram introduces us to the original game that Tenna based his game show off of, in which an entity that the community calls ERAM taunts us about looking for the Shadow Mantle needed to defeat the Knight. ERAM is another of the few characters who explicitly reference both the Shadow Crystals and the Weird Route, while also mentioning their relationship with the concept of freedom. In fact, the Mantle game is pretty much one of the only places in Deltarune at all that hints at the idea of the Weird Route. But none of this would matter if we couldn't make a conclusive connection between Mantle and Friend. We might just be going down a completely random rabbit hole, right? Wrong! Mantle does reference Friend, and on multiple occasions, in fact. In the first board, there's 2 secret rooms to the either side of the pyramid that contain Friend's eyes and mouth. But even more telling is that Friend himself appears in the boss fight against ERAM. In fact, Friend even goes so far as to help you, dropping extra healing items the more times you die to the fight. So, that's another point in the board for directly connecting Friend to the Shadow Crystals and the Weird Route. Other relationships of note here are the Twisted Sword recipe from Malleus, consisting of the Pure Crystal, which we all assume to be the result of collecting the Shadow Crystals, and the Weird Route's Thorn Ring. Notably, the Mantle minigame is referred to in the game files as the Sword Route, which could be another connection. But most importantly of all, a recreation of the shelter south of town is shown in the Mantle's third board. This shelter has been begging the community to figure it out all the way since back in Chapter 1, and now it's even part of the main plot of the game. See, one weird quirk of this shelter that people quickly noticed right away is the extremely slowed down sound effect that plays while you're near it. And if you speed it up by 666%, you get a sound effect from Undertale known as smile.ogg, wrapping us all the way back around again to one of the 2 original motifs associated with Friend, Smiles. In addition, Chapter 3 also creates another direct connection between Friend and the phrase darker than dark, due to Ralsei's explanation of darkness at the start of the chapter. But smiles are an odd detail, present throughout a lot of secrets across both Undertale and Deltarune, from the smiling electrical plug in Queen's basement to the unused rooms in Undertale's waterfall section. But we get one of the most notable appearances when combined with the darker than dark motif because of the sound effect that plays in a room hidden in the game's code called RM_Gaster, where the Wingding's text literally says dark, darker yet darker. This is of course the very same smile.ogg referenced earlier, but just like when we were on the subject of the Twitter takeover, we seem to have hit another dead end, because now we find ourselves talking about another completely different character. It was at this point that I decided to take a break from the topic and watch some other theory videos to see if anything would spark an idea in my head.
Anyone else notice how this fuck-ass cat strolled into our lives one day and just appropriated like half of the symbology that we've associated with Gaster for years? What was up with that? That was weird, right? Like Smiles and Smile.og and the bunker and hell and being the guy who drove Spampton and Jevil insane and Shadow Crystals. That's all Friends now. That belongs to the fuck-ass cat. But something that we gotta remember is that.
And that's when it hit me! Friend and Gaster have always just been the same character, haven't they? It all makes sense now, just like Cammy said, Gaster was once upon a time known by the community to be the character driving the secret bosses insane. And we already know the association between Gaster and the number 6, from his hidden battle stats in Undertale to the typer value used for speaking in both Undertale and Deltarune. And then of course we know he's already tied to the Smile motif because of smile.ogg, and the darker than dark motif because of his entry number 17. And then, of course, because of the Twitter takeover and the Spampton Sweepstakes Phase 2, we also know his association with the weird route and the concept of freedom.
Oh, and before I forget, speaking of associated with Gaster, did you know that he's actually trapped at the bottom of Queen's acid pool? That's my theory. See, because the battery acid is green and Gaster's green.
That's not a theory! That's barely even an association!
But okay. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's step back a bit to this whole typer value thing, right? In Deltarune, this typer value is used in both the game over screen and the intro to the game known as the Gunner Maker. For those who've had the patience to watch through Molly Star's device theory, you'd know about the importance of certain assets in the game's files. Notably, those assets' names. See, files named in all capital letters with irregular prefix naming conventions like device underscore or image underscore are suggested to be part of the device that Gaster used to be able to connect us to the world of Deltarune. And who do we see appear in that list of special files? None other than image underscore friend. And who better would it be for Gaster to refer to as our friend than himself? But sure, maybe that's not enough to convince you that they're the same character. Let's now talk a little bit more about Gaster to see if we can find any additional connections with him. Back on the note of the Gunner Maker, Gunners are a concept which have always been very closely associated with Gaster since all the way back in Undertale, being the only characters who even referred to the existence of him as a character. These Gunners mostly appear in the location most notable for its relation to Gaster, the Core, as it is told that he is the one who is responsible for building it in the first place. But something I feel a lot of the Undertale and Deltarune community might not be aware of is the fact that Gaster really isn't a completely original character. No, there is a character from the game Final Fantasy VII named Dr. Gast, and in this segment of the game, most closely associated with him, a very familiar music track plays.
Okay, you hate all of my other theories, but I know you'll love this one. It could even be my magnum opus. I call it Rousey is Dis's Piles of
hear that? It's literally just like a slowed down, echoey version of Gaster's theme from the sound test room in Undertale, except it was made first. Basically, it's pretty conclusively the case that Toby Fox has taken some direct inspiration from characters in other games, so it's worth considering what about those characters might have been inspiring to Toby Fox in the first place. Professor Gast Faramis, as is his full name, is a character who is the head of Shinra's Science Research Department, and his studies involved an ancient organism that he believed to be a member of an extinct species of human who had special powers tied to the life stream. More importantly, the goal of his research was to create a new human with the powers of the Cetra to guide them to a fabled promised land with unfathomable power contained inside it. Jaro made a really interesting video detailing more of Gaster's connections to Final Fantasy VII, including the relationship between Undertale's core and the Mako reactors. But the idea of the Promised Land is one of the few details that I care about for a couple particular reasons. Firstly, it reinvokes the religious imagery that we've already associated with Gaster. But secondly, it ties well into one of the other possible interpretations for his character. Remember that Tale of Hell? Well, it too has been theorized to be inspired by a game we know Toby has played, being Breath of Fire 2. In the opening minutes of the game, two children are out in the wilderness searching for a lost pet when they stumble across a cave. In that cave, they encounter a tale that looks suspiciously similar to the one prophesized in Deltarune, which guides them through the cave before attacking your companion and speaking to you. Let's see if this all sounds familiar. The creature refers to your character as a sort of prophesized child with the ability to open a gate, allowing him to realize the strength of God. Next, the narration of the game describes the event as a nightmare in which a demon separated their heart from their body. Now, let's recap the beginning of Deltarune. Gaster, talking from Toby Fox's Twitter account, speaks of his desire to make a connection to us, using our hope to create a new future. Then, the red soul that represents us in the game is promptly placed into Chris Dreamer's body, a literal prophesized child who utilizes our seemingly divine strength to seal dark fountains. And to top it off, it's theorized that Chris and Des are the two children who followed the pointed tail into the town's shelter, which is what led to the disappearance and Chris's trauma involving that shelter. Though, if it's true that Gaster is friend, and that Gaster is inspired by both of these pieces of media, and that Chris and Des are the two children the organic was referring to, it spells out an extremely clear sequence of events for us. Chris and Des followed Gaster into the shelter, causing her to disappear, and then rips Chris's soul out so that he can use it years later to open the connection to our world, basically injecting us into the soul.
Hey, it's me again, just for another quick interjection. Just wanted to say I didn't necessarily want to imply that, like, it's a fixed timeline, right? Like, obviously there's issues with the idea of Gaster just holding on to Chris's soul for years and years, and Chris just being soulless that entire time would be very, very strange, I think. So, like, I'm not necessarily saying that's exactly how the events happened, but it is clear to me, at the very least, that there is a sequence of events that has occurred involving Chris and Des going to the shelter, Des goes missing, something happens between Chris and Gaster involving the soul. Soul at some point is then used to summon us. Like, I think another possibility of something that might have happened is sort of like a devil's deal situation where, like, Chris may have made a deal with Gaster for some purpose. And that could be, for example, like the promise that you hear in the phone call at the end of chapter 4 and all that. The promise in our hearts and all that. So I think there's other reasonable explanations to how this is. Don't take kind of what I said prior to this interjection as like exact fact, completely literal, only way to interpret it, right? Anyway.
Just like Dr. Gast and Barraberry, Gaster's goal was to use the special power of a destined child to open the path through incredible divine power, and that's just what he did.
I mean, that's fine and all, but doesn't all of this hinge on Gaster and Friend being the same person?
Yeah, not to poop on your party, boss, but everybody knows this is what Gaster looks like. I mean, look, he's got the scar on the face, and I don't know if that's a body or another face, but no, this is definitely what Gaster looks like. That's what I've seen on all the Undertale fan art.
Yeah, I knew from the start that this was going to be a hard sell because of that. The community has already had it decided for most of the last 10 years that Mystery Man is Gaster, but I think there's a few explanations that can still allow this to work. One option is that Mystery Man never actually was Gaster, and that people just falsely assumed such. I mean, if that's the case, I suspect the real identity of the Mystery Man is actually the Eggman in Deltarune. I mean, just think about it. They're both strange figures with a quirky personality that only have a random chance to appear in a room that exists between two other rooms, and they both seemingly disappear after being interacted with. So, while I am quite confident in saying that the Eggman is the Mystery Man, what I'm not confident about is whether or not both or either of those characters are Gaster. Another simple answer is if they are Gaster is the multi-Gaster theory, which essentially suggests that there is more than one entity which are all pieces of Gaster after he got split across time and space. This would also mean that Friend could very well just be a piece of Gaster too. A third option is that Friend is more like Gaster's avatar in the world of Deltarune, in much the same way that the soul is our avatar. This version is a lot more in line with Cammy Boy's cat and mouse theory that I referenced earlier, in which Friend takes the form of a cat because of the cat computer commands being run by Gaster to watch us from his monitor.
And, yeah, I also want to just clarify that, I don't necessarily think that the only option for the story to work, right, is that, like, Friend and Gaster are actually the same character. They could just be two different characters, honestly. Like, it could literally be, like, Gaster is the first character we speak to in the Goner Maker, and then, like, Friend is the second voice or something like that, which also kind of works with the idea I was talking about earlier, in which, you have the Weird Route pages which have some Gaster text, and then there could be like the other text in the email responses could be more like the second voice. So there's different options for how some of these things can work. I think multiple of them will tell a really good story, but I kind of go to the conclusion of like Friend is Gaster in this video because it's ultimately just the simplest explanation when you consider all of these motifs, right? Like, both characters overlap so incredibly thoroughly with almost all of the same motifs. They appear in all of the same places in the story. And as Cammy Boy said, they only recently started moving our association with those themes from one character to another. And so the real easier solution to all of this isn't that they've just been two different characters we've moved the identity over, but rather that they've always been the same character, and that Toby Fox has been giving us character development for Gaster this entire time.
But honestly, regardless of which version you think is most likely, I think by now it should be pretty clear how Gaster and Friend are tied to almost all of the same core motifs of Deltarune's story. And personally, I think it would be a much more satisfying and simple explanation if Toby made only one single character be the source of all these motifs, instead of wasting all the development that we could have had for Gaster on an entirely different cryptid. But what does all of this tell us anyway? Why should we care whether or not they're the same character? Well, all of this goes back to the shadow crystals and the Weird Route. One of the most important things we can do when analyzing this story is to ask what every character's motivations are, and I think it's important that we recall once more what Gaster's motivations have been right from the start, to change the prophecy. Whether the changes we make are good or bad don't seemingly matter much to him, but what is clear is that Gaster has been actively guiding us to do the Weird Route, which is apparent when you remember the Spamton Sweepstakes Phase 2 pages I talked about earlier. Beyond that, most of what we can say is kind of just speculation, and this video is getting a bit long already, so I think this might be a good point to leave it off and save the motivations for another video. So, did I convince you that Gaster and Friend are the same person? If not, please tell me why, I'd love to know. And if you are convinced, leave a like to show your support for the cult of Catster.
And if you want to learn about the truth behind E-Ram, you can find out everything you need to know over on the Garathon's YouTube channel, which is me. Wait, who am I?
And if you want to see my rambles about Deltarune alongside some neat fan art I've done in the past, then follow me over at Pancake Pooch at Blue Sky. That's pancakepooch.bsky.social.
Oh, hey, you're back! Well, I guess it's time for some closing remarks. Or, as we in the business like to call it, an extroduction. Actually, fun fact about that word, did you know that it's the real opposite to the word introduction? Like, everybody's been calling them intros and outros this whole time, but it turns out that outro is really just slang for a word that kinda already existed. Just like the words interior and exterior, which refer to the inside and outside of something. Extroduction means to move out of a piece of media the same way introduction means to move into it. Kinda makes me wonder if we should start calling the ends of videos extros instead. It's kind of a fun word to say. Extro. Extro. What was I talking about again? Oh, right. Subscribe!